all the educators here. And we welcome the second session panel discussion panelists here, Professor Poonam Batra. We have Dr. Swaroop Raval, and we also have Mr. Rajiv Mehrotra. Kindly welcome them, a big round of applause. From empowering the spirit or the spiritual self, we now move forward towards building human capacity through head, heart, and hand. And for this panel discussion, the topic is informing pedagogy through experience, and in short, experiential learning. So we have our very able and distinguished guests here. I'll introduce one by one all three of them. Professor Poonam Batra, I don't think that you need any introduction for her or anyone who's on the stage right now, but still I have to do my duty. Professor Poonam Batra is one of India's leading educationalists with over 25 years of experience in teaching, research, training, management, and consultancy. She is Professor of Education at University of Delhi, where she co-created the framework for the Bachelor of Elementary Education. In short, we call it BLEd, India's much celebrated 4-year professional elementary teacher education program, and we all are aware of it. She is recipient of Jawaharlal Nehru Memorial Fund Award 2007. She also received Career Award by UGC, Government of India in 1995. She has published internationally and domestically books, chapters, monographs, articles, compilations, in index, peer-reviewed journals, a lot of them actually, in areas of public policy in education, elementary education curriculum and pedagogy, developmental and educational psychology, and gender studies. We welcome you, ma'am, on this stage. Thank you so much, and she'll be moderating the session. Mr. Rajiv Mehrotra, he's an Indian writer, television producer, director, documentary filmmaker, a personal student of respected Dalai Lama Ji, for whom he manages as trustee secretary the Foundation for Universal Responsibility. He is best known as a former acclaimed host of one of India's longest running talk shows on public television. As a documentary filmmaker, producer, and commissioning editor, his 650 films have won 50 national awards from the President of India and more than 285 national and international awards. 3 of his documentary films have been archived by the Motion Picture Academy of America, well known for presenting the Oscars. He has authored 9 books that have been published in 50 editions and languages. He serves as the founder and managing trustee of the Public Service Broadcasting Trust, and till recently, chairman of the Media Foundation. Thank you so much for being here. And that's Madam Aditi Mishra, who's formally welcoming Mr. Rajiv Mehrotra. Dr. Swaroop Raval, or we know her better as Dr. Swaroop Sampat. She is an Indian actress who has acted in several Hindi language films such as Naram Garam, Na Khuda, and is known for her performance in the television serial Ye Jo Hai Zindagi. I believe we all know about it. She won the Miss India contest in 1979 and represented India at Miss Universe 1979. What is an actress doing here? Because Dr. Swaroop obtained a PhD in education from University of Oxford. She did her doctoral thesis on using drama to enhance life skills in children with learning disabilities. So warm welcome, Dr. Swaroop, on the stage. Now I would request Ms. Anita Makkar, Principal SDFC School, to formally felicitate Professor Poonam Batra. Mr. Rajiv Mehrotra was felicitated by Ms. Aditi Mishra, Principal DPS Sector 45, Gurugram, and Dr. Swaroop Sampat by Ms. Aparna Eri, Principal DAV Sector 14, Gurugram. So are we all set for the panel discussion? Yes? Okay, over to you, Professor Poonam Batra. Thank you so much.
Okay, right. So Well, first of all, let me thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to sit amidst all of you and the panelists that are on the session today. Our focus in this session is on looking at experience as critical to pedagogic communication and pedagogy in the classroom. I do remember quite clearly that it was John Dewey, way back in the early 1930s. That was one of his last book, in fact, called Experience and Education, where he was trying to develop a theory of experience for education. And there have been several different dimensions talked about with regard to the role of experience in education. In the introduction, it was mentioned that it is probably experiential education, but I'm sure many of us as educators, practitioners in the classroom, and professionals outside the classroom in education do know that there's a lot of play of words. So I'm not very sure whether we can call this experiential education, but certainly the role of experience. What is experience in education? And I think it alludes to a very critical aspect of education, which I would call ways of knowing, because there seems to be a very limited frame within which we have truncated formal education. And it's so important to open it up. And I'm so glad that today we have on the panel two eminent people from within the performing arts, filmmaking, media studies, that look at ways of knowing which is outside what we call the formal space. We've tinkered with that as well in our teacher preparation program, and we realize the power of that kind of communication. And I'm so glad that we will have both our panelists share their experiences on the topic, and perhaps then we can also have enough time for an interaction with all of you in terms of your questions and comments. So may I first ask Rajiv to please make his presentation on the topic that we have been given today. Thank you.
My fellow panelists, a lady I admire greatly and learn so much from, Sister Shivani, ladies and gentlemen, I must confess that I feel completely awestruck sitting on this side of this auditorium, and also that, to address distinguished teachers from a community of, the best schools really in India. And first I should celebrate all of you collectively for the incredible work that you do with education. And I have to make a confession to all you teachers that I have never been a good student. I was about to say very good student. I never got a first division in my life. So I'm really in awe of all these teachers. As someone who works in the realm of communication, a very important prerequisite to look at the whole notion of and the idea of experience as a process of learning is to try and understand first what are the resistors to communication, and what are the resistors that inhibit us from actually being able to evoke experience amongst the students, and to move beyond the paradigm of the teacher as sort of spouting out material from a textbook in the curriculum, and the student as a receptacle for that information. So I think what we're really looking here is to see how that relationship can be transcended. And I think we cannot escape the larger context in which education unfolds in India. And I think the challenge really comes from the aspirations for education, the demand pull, not the least from the economic and social structures that look at it as an assembly line to provide human capital. I was appalled that recently there was an IMF report report that, commented on the lack of human capital and the very use of the phrase, and to put that on par with technology, land, money, and skills to drive human greed from ever-expanding markets for things we mostly do not need. And Gandhiji had famously drawn a distinction between human need and greed, and today we humans are being reduced to factors of production in an economy and as consumers of that economy. So that space in which we seek to nurture experiential learning is inhibited by the enormous pressure of what we are circumscribed by. I think the other impact of the way our education is unfolding is that, a study at Pondicherry University tells us that 37%, 13%, and 2% of the students suffer from moderate, severe, and extremely severe depression. And every hour, a student commits suicide in India. So when we talk about experiential learning, we're not just looking at sort of enriching the lives of students, but there are very serious crises that education needs to address. And it tells us that our education system, the curriculum and the pedagogy have really failed. And our emotional intelligence and our resilience are completely out of sync with the world we have to engage with. And what could be a worse indictment on this? I'd like to reflect briefly on some of the insights and perspectives that India's civilizational heritage offers to our curriculum and pedagogy that might serve as antidotes to these challenges. And inherently, they do draw upon the most sophisticated mind training techniques in human history, and to train them to find equanimity and comfort. And without equanimity and comfort, the process of learning cannot begin to unfold. And it's truly tragic as to how little our education system understands this. So I draw largely, because as a student of Buddhism, on the Nalanda tradition of educating people. And very crucially, unlike the Western traditions, it looks simultaneously at method, which is the experience, and the wisdom, and dovetails that so that it leads to transformation that impacts our deepest reflexive responses. So I might intellectually understand that it isn't healthy to be angry, but then how do I stop being angry? I can listen to a speaker and be very impressed by what they say, and like a moral science, when I'm told do this, don't do this, or whatever, the framework of appropriate behavior or of the kind of mind I need to nurture. But the challenge really is how do we internalize that? So what really happens here is that one without the other can be dangerous, between wisdom and method. And so wisdom is first cultivated through reason and logic, the curriculum, as it were. It is then complemented and reinforced through method, experience, and sort of like the pedagogy in a manner of speaking, so that true transformation takes place. Let me give you a common example of how this has been misunderstood and mispracticed, and not appropriately practiced. Mispractice isn't an appropriate word. Is really in say, the teaching of yoga. Now, yoga historically is a very small aspect of Patanjali, is a very minor element of the larger framework of what yoga really embodies and represents. Now, yoga is really a method. It is not the wisdom. So when we practice yoga as method, without the wisdom that goes with it, there is an extreme danger. And the danger is that it enhances body consciousness. B, that when it is mass yoga, if, for example, you have a hernia and you start pumping, you're dead. If you have high blood pressure and you hold your breath, that's extremely dangerous. So that is in a sense, a misapplication, a wrong application of method, because, again, Patanjali teaches us that you have to have yama and niyama, which is really the moral framework, or at least an aspiration or an understanding of that moral framework, which then the practice of yoga helps you realize. So one without the other can be dangerous. And it is then that the realization that is the potential of yoga manifests itself, when both the wisdom that is associated with yoga dovetails with the method and the practice. So even though we draw on that civilizational heritage, we do not really end up following it in its purest form. The other aspect, experiential aspect, which is, which derives from yoga, you go from yoga, asana, from yama, niyama, asana, pranayam, and then concentration. And we know that the experience of concentration can both be exhilarating, because it is to the exclusion of ideas, process, and thoughts that disturb us, but it is also something that's very useful, no matter what we do, whether it is pursuing a text or doing research. So concentration is a universally valued quality. The other emphasis, and this is something I learned greatly from the work of the Brahma Kumaris, is seva and practice, is the idea of karuna, compassion. And so I just want to propose this as an experience that is worth nurturing in the education system. Why? Not just because it's virtuous, but it has enormous practical value, both for the individual and for society and the community. Now, why is that? Research in several universities in the United States, where in our work with the Dalai Lama, we today have Dalai Lama centers for the study of compassion. Why? Because they have found in psychological research that these children who are committing suicide and are deeply mentally disturbed, so when you interview these students, you find that there is an excessive use of the word I, me, mine. The I that suffers. So what compassion really does is, it encourages you to think of the other, because it's useful for you. So we circumscribe that with the logical process of understanding why it is important and useful, not just because it's godly or religious or a worthy thing to do, but why it is useful. That then dovetails with mind training techniques to cultivate and experience compassion. The intellectual framework also then reaches out to the young person and says, look, we live in an interdependent world. So if I'm sitting here, somebody is running this microphone, somebody's organized this event, the breakfast that I had, somebody cooked it for me, and the farmer grew the vegetable and the fertilizer, whatever it is, emotionally. At every level, we live in an interdependent world. We need to understand that intellectually. We then cultivate that realization that I'm talking about through the practice of meditation. What is meditation? Meditation is a conscious effort at changing our mental diet. And we have to recognize, particularly at this time in the world, which is getting increasingly fragmented, that each one of us needs a different mental diet, just as we need a different diet for what we eat. Someone may be diabetic. This morning I was having tea. Everybody put aside their sugar. I took 2 cubes. I'm not diabetic, and I enjoy sugar. So that's my particular diet. So similarly, each one needs a different mental diet. And so what the practice does is, amongst the techniques is that you reach a level of quietude, and you visualize your mother's love. And while holding on to the emotion that the mother's love evokes, you then sort of transpose that with someone you're neutral to, and finally the enemy. So that compassion that you receive from your mother is transposed onto a third person. So it's a whole range of techniques that make that possible. I just want to conclude, by saying that it's imperative that we understand and appreciate, as Sister Shivani will repeatedly tell you, is that we spend so much time in cultivating our minds, in cultivating our bodies, in getting our clothes together, in looking beautiful, of makeup or a zillion things, or preparing for our exams. But we spend no time in the curriculum and in the pedagogy that we promote for actually training the mind to be, for want of a better word, I hate the word happiness because it reminds me of the American Constitution and what that happiness represents. So let's just say equanimity and ease. And we find no time to do that. And, we have made efforts at trying to look at, value in education. But curriculum, there is no time for schools and institutions to move beyond that expansive curriculum. And the tyranny of the curriculum is that, Abhijit Banerjee, who's loved and hated simultaneously, has pointed out that there are so many schools where people have, are in class 5 but have class 2 reading skills. And the curriculum just keeps driving them on, class 5, class 6, class 7, or whatever it is, till they reach their level of, have exceeded, far crossed their levels of incompetence. I'm just going to take another short minute, because there is this amazing, and I recommend, two people you must watch on YouTube. One is Ken Robinson, and the other is, who's not really into education, is the Jewish public intellectual Yuval Noah Harari. And one of the things Harari is telling us is that we have to now start training our children and our students, not just for a variety of vocations, but training them in the ability to teach and learn themselves, because every 5 to 10 years, the jobs we think we're preparing them for is going to change. We're also moving into a new space, and which is that traditionally we have spent the first sort of 20 years of our lives learning, and the next 40, 50 years of our lives, practicing and using that learning for our jobs. But particularly with the growth of artificial intelligence, that is going to change every 5 to 10 years. So not only will we have to keep reskilling ourselves, but we are going to have to find the emotional resilience to keep embracing change. And without that, built into that experiential learning, built into the education system, life will be a disaster. Just to conclude, to say that ultimately, all experiential learning is about practice. And it involves repeated practice so that it transforms us and transforms our deepest reflexive responses. So the mantra there will have to be practice, practice, and practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajiv. I think there's in there a lot to think about. And may I now request... Can I speak from there? Sure. Would you like to?
Yeah, because I have slides.
Sure, please. So Swaroop will share her presentation with us.
A very good afternoon to you all, dignitaries and panelists. I am so thrilled to be here, and I'm actually going to be taking off from his conclusion and talk about the Nayi Taaleem and an experience I've had with students in school. So this is about civil disobedience in the 21st century, taking Gandhiji out of the textbook. This line is especially there because I felt as a teacher, the children of this generation started seeing him sometimes as a boring figure, or sometimes as a stooped gentleman with a stick and, round specs. But I had learned a lot from my grandmother about him, and I had learned a lot about him from my grandmother, and I think he is one of the most interesting persons. I learned a lot of my values from him, and whatever I am, a lot of it is because of what he did in his life. This is a very interesting thing. Gandhiji once told Narayan Bhai that we each need to create our own definition of Nayi Talim in order to make it relevant and alive. That means we have to fine-tune it, reimagine it in a dialectic conversation with all the stakeholders. And that means we can all create many models of Nayi Talim. I love this. Vinoba Bhave expressed it in a spiritual way by saying, Yog, Sahyog, Udyog. I have done a lot of work in this, but today I'm not going to be talking about Udyog and Sahyog. But I'm going to be talking about Narayan Bhai's take on Nayi Talim, which is Preeti, Mukti, and Abhivyakti. This is a story about how an educator awakened her students who were sleeping or indifferent to what's happening around in the world. So this thought came to me in 2011 when there was this great movement against corruption, and I in the classroom looked at my children and wondered, what did they think about civil disobedience? What did they know about making a difference to our nation? I think it's the responsibility of the teacher, to do something about it. Because there was all this great thing happening, especially in Delhi, and me in Mumbai, and a lot of our kids in Gujarat were away from it, but yet they kept on reading about it. And I said, what did they think of civil disobedience? And as a teacher, you have to be prepared all the time. And I thought, this is the moment when I can take my children into a different world. So Nayi Talim is not about a free country. It's about good society. And I believe we as educators have a very important role to play in creating a good society. I looked at the textbooks and I cried. Because this is one of the most boring chapters in the history book. And it is the most wonderful time of the freedom movement. The Dandi March, the Salt March, that's what made us, free, got us thinking, the Indians. And is this what we're going to be teaching our children? I really felt sorry about it. Drama can make history come alive. So it's about curriculum studies, creativity, and citizenship. It's about rethinking your values in art and aesthetic experiences. And it's that which makes the children. Like I always say, art is action, reflection, transformation. So I looked at the different type of civil disobedience: integrity, justice, and policy-based. The first thing I taught them was Antigone, where the little sister fights for her brother's right to a burial. Then I took them to the Montgomery bus incident. And there I told them this beautiful thing about this great man in America who worshipped Gandhiji. And there were people all over the world who have done these great civil disobedience movements worshipping Gandhiji. And we don't remember it, we don't want to acknowledge it, we don't want our children to know about it. I think it's very sad. So I started them with this beautiful lesson where I gave them a bowl. I told them to choose from a bowl of lemon. And I told them, please identify it properly, your lemon. Some of them did a lot of cheating by marking it. And then I said, come on now, give it back. When they gave it back, they really didn't know what to expect because they never know what to expect from Swaroop ma'am. So they gave the lemon back, and I said, now identify your lemon again. So they thought, like, she's real fool. We can easily do it, because we've identified it and they've marked it so they gave it. And then I said, now that you've taken it, your lemon, give it back. And I peeled them all. And I said, now identify your lemon. And so obviously they couldn't. Well, that was the first lesson they learned about accepting everybody. And that was what Gandhiji talked about, the Harijans and accepting everybody. Said, we're just different from outside. From inside, we're all the same. And now I'm going to make lemon juice from this, and I only want you to drink lemon juice from your lemon. So, of course, it was great fun. And they said, no, miss, we can't do that. I said, no, come on. But they really learned something very beautiful in that lesson. Thank you. Yeah. So then I set up a very economical museum by just taking photocopies, black and white photocopies of the freedom movement, and I introduced them to India at that time. You see, it was very important for them to know. There were my children, the smart girls wearing denim shorts and ganjis, and, the boys and everybody working together. They did not know about, the movement at that time. They did not know of India at that time. When I asked them about it, I gave them a very beautiful example. When I was in this Rajpur village, which has got only 300 population of OBCs, I said, now just imagine somebody comes from abroad and says, I am the ruler of Rajpur village, and I am going to force you to eat, they're all vegetarians there, I said, force you to eat non-vegetarian. Just random laws. So then they started understanding, because you see, they couldn't understand what is happening to India because these are the children of free India. They needed to understand why this old man took the trouble to break a salt tax. It was such a lovely coincidence that I've done this twice. Once in Ahmedabad at Rajpur, which is in Gandhinagar, so near Sabarmati, and the second time in a school called LP Savani in Surat, which is near Dandi. So I'll tell you why it was really lucky. So then I read out the most beautiful speech, which still brings tears to my eyes and goose pimples just thinking about it. 10,000 people, Sabarmati, Gandhiji reading out his speech and saying that he may never come back. Just imagine that. That's what we teachers are meant to do. We're supposed to bring alive the world for them. And believe me, I did it. The reason I did it is, and I said it in English, remember all these are Gujarati students, and a lot of them were tribals. And I said, so they're saying, why aren't you telling us in Gujarati? I said, Gandhiji said it in English. So they said, why did he say it in English? I said, the world press was there. He wanted the world to know about this. And then we did this incredible session where, that boy who's speaking is Gandhiji, and the boy next to him is Madhav Desai, and there's Abha and Ami, and we did a whole interview of the world press interviewing Gandhiji. And the most beautiful thing about it is when Gandhiji forgot, Madhavji would tell him, you're supposed to say this. It was really nice because you see, they were all learning together. There was one very nice thing is that in the Rajpur village, when this child who played Madhav Desai turned around to me and said, ma'am, I want to read his autobiography. And I got it for him from the Gujarat Vidyapeeth, and it's such a thick autobiography. Every night that child read the autobiography. This is what we have to do. This is Nayi Talim. What did we learn? These beautiful things which Gandhiji did. He told his satyagrahis, I want one theli, one bag, thela, with a diary, one bed sheet, and one pair of clothes. That's it. And that is the journey they took with only that much. So my children asked, why the diary? Because every day the Satyagrahis, the 70 of them, were expected to write their reflections at night and share them in the morning at Pratna time. The food that they ate was the bare minimum khichdi. They stayed in the villages and didn't want to create a big expense for the villagers. And every night in the prayer meets, he talked about the evil social practices of our country. These are the great things he did. He could have taken a train and gone to Dandi, but he didn't. He went village to village, changing it. So I took my kids to Sabarmati, and have you ever seen kids like this in a museum? Mostly I see bored kids. So I only allowed them to see the Dandi part of Sabarmati. And then we met Amrut Dada, who was he came and he specially talked to our kids. And he told about the Satyagraha movements. And he told about how it was to be their age in the time of the freedom movement. Similarly, for the other school, we went to Dandi, and we saw the hut in which Gandhiji stayed in. And in the same bagh where Gandhiji had his last prayer, before he broke the salt tax, we met a Gosai Dada. And Gosai Dada was a little kid when Gandhiji had marched past, and he saw the whole scene and the prayers from a treetop. This is what he told. And he told one beautiful thing, is that he said, all my friends left and went abroad to study, but I didn't. They are happy and I am content. You know something? This gentleman never ever went and met Gandhiji, because he said, Gandhiji is such a great man, I can't waste his time. But for Gandhiji, he gave up his education, and he was in the jail in Tihar when Gandhiji was there during the jail bharo. Now, this is what my students learned. So I asked them, which is one of Gandhiji's habit which you will inculcate, and one for the nation. And not these normal ones. My children came up with beautiful ones. At prayer time, we will concentrate on prayer and really share our reflections. They learned the meaning of all the songs that were sung at that time. Cleaning. This is my pre-primary school children in Rajpur village. Aren't they cute? And see the posture of the guy who's cleaning the toilet. We all clean toilets. And we're so, and remember one more thing, is this is a class which took place in 2012, before the Swachhata Abhiyan started in our country. Diary Lakhwati, I've come to know myself. That's what he said, one little kid. And he's severely dyslexic, but he takes the trouble of writing the diary so that he can learn more about himself. And those two girls are from the tribal villages of Dang. They're taking the trouble to read English because Gandhiji's speech was in English. Changing the nation. I'm very proud of one of my students. She started teaching first her maid's daughter when she was herself in the 7th standard. Now she has a small thing called the Kishori Foundation, where she teaches other kids. What can ordinary people do? Insistence on truth, non-violence, fearlessness, and love everybody. I've got one incident to share, is that when we did the play, we asked the kids to talk about this. And one child had stopped a bullying incident in the park. So I said, I hope you're going to share it in front of the parents. He says, no, ma'am, I'm not. The reason is that the child who bullied me, his parents are also there in the audience. And I don't want them to feel hurt that their child bullied me and I gave it back. This is citizenship. Freedom is just a word otherwise. Equality, truth, justice, or caring doesn't make sense unless we put it into practice every day, and especially in our schools. You can see the whole film on this. It's on YouTube. Drama in Education, Taking Gandhi Out of the Textbook. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Swaroop. I think, we've had some very interesting thoughts and reflections with fairly profound meanings in the way both the panelists have communicated what it really means to bring experience to the world of education. Because the world of education in our four walls is usually very drab, dull, dry, with very little experience and something that touches the heart and uses faculties other than cognition. So I would now like to throw it open to all of you for your comments, your questions to the panelists, and if we have a little more time beyond one, because that is when the session was meant to end, then we can have 2 rounds of questions, maybe 3 to 4 or 5 questions in each round, and then we'll ask the panelists to respond. So, anybody? Questions, comments? Yes. So do you have something to speak into?
Yeah, on the table.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm from social studies department. I take up the social studies as a passion. I could see the passion in you.
Thank you.
And amazing job. And many more such videos if you have. Please share it.
I will definitely share it. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. We'd like people to speak into the mic because then everybody can hear. You can sit and speak. Yeah.
May I ask a question, please?
Yeah, I don't know where
Yeah.
you are.
Yeah, I'm this side.
Raise your hand.
Okay, please. Yeah, you can speak into the mic. Yeah.
Last, I think the 2-3 speakers talked about Nai Talim and various things. But these days in the schools, what problem we are facing is about fighting amongst the children. So we talked about anger management, all these things. But the problem is still persisting in many of the schools that the children are fighting among themselves in the class, during the lessons, during the school hours, whenever there is a transition of period happening between one lesson and the other lesson. So how do we control this kind of an anger management among the children? What is the practical, solution for this kind of a problem?
So let's note some of these questions and a couple more questions and then we'll have a response. No?
So I think we can answer that.
Okay. Would you like
Can
to
I answer it first?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there is somebody else. Yeah.
Speak into the mic, please.
There's no mic after that level.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Isn't there? Oh, there is.
I think there are mics.
Yeah, I thought as much,
Yeah.
but
Why don't you sit down? Why don't you sit down? You might be able to speak into the mic.
This mic is on.
Yeah. Go ahead. No, the mic is not working. But can you be a teacher who sort of shouts in the classroom?
yeah.
Very good afternoon, Ma'am Swaroop, other chairpersons and everyone here. Well, basically I feel very strongly that in today's scenario and society, we need patience. Do you agree to me? पेशेंस, धीरज बहुत ज़्यादा आवश्यकता है। मैं चाहूँगी आप तीनों में से कोई मुझे बताए कि मैं इसको कैसे अपने स्कूल में स्थापित कर सकूँ, बच्चों को कैसे सिखाऊँ कि पेशेंस बहुत ज़रूरी है, क्योंकि बच्चा धक्का भी देता है तो इतनी बड़ी कंप्लेंट दूसरा बच्चा कर देता है कि इसने मुझे मारा, इसने मुझे पीटा, इसने मुझे धक्का दिया, मैं इसके पापा को कहूँगा, फला ढिमका एंड मोर, यू सी। तो अब इन चीज़ों को मैं कैसे सिखाऊं बच्चों को, थोड़ा मुझे गाइड करें कोई भी आप। थैंक यू सो मच।
Yeah, I would like, my name is Mrs. Leena Dua, and I would like to ask this question about compassion and resilience. We were talking about these words. The child is stressed. I need to get him back in the middle zone. So how do I go ahead with it? They are beautiful words, but getting the child back to the normal resilience level, it's not easy. So if I can have some practice from you, thank you.
Okay, so I think I'll ask the panelists to respond. Would you like to start? Yeah. So let's keep
Okay,
time
so
in mind.
actually I have one answer for all of y'all. One of the most important things.
Excuse me, ma'am, I'm here. I have the same question related to this thing. As Shivani Didi has told that, I'm here. As Shivani Didi has told that, no anger zone in the school. But one question arises that when the students are not coming with completing the homework, then obviously the teacher has anger on that. Teacher has to scold कि why I have not completed the homework and all. और अगर हम बच्चों को बहुत प्यार से पेशेंस रख के कहते हैं कि just do tomorrow, तो students are usually habitual for that कि ma'am will not say anything, I will not complete the homework. So what is the solution of that thing? कि हमने बच्चों को पेशेंस से कहा कि चलिए कल करके आइएगा, आज होमवर्क नहीं किया, कल करना. The student will be habitual for that. वो टीचर को take it easy लेते हैं, तो what is the solution of that thing? Just please tell us.
Okay, thank you very much for all your questions. I'm now requesting the panelists to respond to these.
So for all these, I have just one answer. And believe me, it has worked. And I've been working since 20 years in it. And that is life skill education. That is what we sorely need. But please, for heaven's sakes, don't tell me what all y'all have been doing. Not that kind of life skills. We need to have life skill education curriculums which use experiential learning, because lecture, debates are not as effective in life skill education. And believe me, I've done it. I've worked in Gujarat, Maharashtra, Rajasthan for all these years. In fact, even my PhD was in using life skill education. And I have found tremendous change in children. One of the things is like what you said. Remember, you said practice, 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 practice. And that means you need to start doing life skill education from primary. And why primary? We can start at pre-primary. And it should go all the way up to higher education. Because every time the topic can change, but basic skills are the same, and we need to really practice them and work on them. We need to be reminded of them. There are no shortcuts in this. So you can't say that, okay, great, I have this anger room, go and steam out. No, sorry, it's not going to work that way. Because there has to be a cognitive explanation to it too. There has to be a practice of it too. There has to be a practice of anger management. You can't just tell them, keep quiet, and from tomorrow you're not going to be angry. It's not going to work. So you really have to go on practicing. And that is what I had suggested to the MHRD, is that we have life skill education in our schools at least once a week, one class per week. And you just see the change. I have experienced it. And I have worked with a diverse range of children. I've worked in IB schools, I've worked in ICSE, I've worked in CBSE, I've worked in ISE. I've even worked with children on the street. I've worked with children with child labor. I've taught all the KGBs of Gujarat, life skill education. And believe me, I have a 100% success rate. It really works. The thing is, we need to know how to do it. Thank you. We need to train our teachers, and we really need to do it. It'll make a huge difference. Not only will we have a better school and better, homes, we will have a better society. That's what's very important. Thank you.
Thank you. May I ask Rajiv to respond now?
Good afternoon, everyone.
He has to answer.
I think he has to
Well,
respond
just,
to the...
very briefly, I think you've had a very eloquent, and I agree with everything that's been said. I only want to just take that a little further. And again, I keep referring to our civilizational heritage, and I think it's important that we understand it, because that is the process that circumscribes our lives and everything that we do. So we have the notion of afflictive emotions, we describe them, which means negative emotions. And for every particular emotion, there is an antidote. And it has to start, as Swaroop just said, with the teacher. And the lifestyle management has to start with the teacher itself. You cannot react with anger to a student who hasn't done their homework and then expect that at some future time, when the student is upset, that he doesn't respond with anger.
Exactly.
And I think that in order to achieve that, and that's what I was really pointing to, and there was this question of saying that compassion and resilience are beautiful words. Well, of course they're beautiful words, but they're also effective words, because it is, we have just tried to identify what are the core values that will give us the change. So if I were just to look at the idea of compassion, is that when that student hasn't done the homework, has the teacher paused compassionately to find out what the reason is? I mean, sometimes there are legitimate reasons. There may have been a death in the family, the student may not be able to perform. Now, if we have a standard form response to all students who haven't done their homework, we're asking for trouble. We aren't being emotionally intelligent in how we respond to that particular crisis. The second point that I think I tried to make earlier was, and again, I think Swaroop is pointing to that, is that there is no instant solution. We can't tell you that, look, this happens and so you do this, and it's all over. It is practice. It is a whole cultivating things so that they are not merely verbal, intellectual concepts, but they become reflexive responses for you and the students. And there is this whole idea of a Rubicon of 10,000 hours. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's sort of said that, for someone to become a piano maestro or a great cricketer or a great sportsman, it's 10,000 hours is sort of like a phrase that's thrown around. Gosh, we're willing to spend that much time on the sports field for our students to become cricketers or sportspersons, but we don't have that kind of time to invest in training the mind, and we want immediate, instantaneous results, and we're very dissatisfied when it doesn't happen. And so it was just to reaffirm that a lot of research has gone into identifying the single quality that would be acceptable, because that is another challenge. We are a diverse country with diverse religions, with diverse social contexts, where we have to be very careful that we look for ideas and notions that do not resonate with a particular faith or sub-faith. So it's not just a question of Hindus. I mean, Hinduism itself is so diverse. And so we're looking at, I hate to use the word secular because it's misunderstood. So we're looking at secular concepts which would be acceptable and can be assimilated across cultures, societies, and communities.
Thank you.
I have two questions, if I may permit.
Yeah, so
I have a question.
We need to finish. Well, I've been
Hello.
asked that I need to close the session.
1 minute, ma'am.
So there is no 1 minute, I believe.
Two quick questions, if I'm permitted.
Well, actually, I've been asked to close the session, so can I use my sort of chair to take this liberty? I'm sorry, but I will just say a few words as, the moderator, the chair of this session. I think it's absolutely important that we begin with the understanding, which both the presentations have clearly focused on, that the current education system is a system that is contained. It is actually limiting us in many ways, specifically in the way we in a very limited way, look at specific faculties that are developed and completely ignore the other faculties. So even if we look at Nai Taaleem, which was so interestingly brought out, I think what Gandhiji was also trying to do, apart from the fact that he wanted the head, heart, and the hand to work together, and the idea of economic challenges of running a huge system in a big country like this, I think he was trying to bring in the subaltern knowledges into the classrooms as well. The idea that we are such a diverse country doesn't sort of stop at celebrating diversity. It actually involves bringing in the different voices, the different marginal subaltern voices into the classrooms so that our children understand what diversity is and then go on to understand what could be prejudice, what could be discrimination, and so on. And I think the other critical aspect of experience in education is this ability to reflect on oneself. You know, the reflexive mode that has been talked about. The fact that we are not just talking about ourselves, the fact that we are connected to the other. So after all, the very idea of Swaraj was not just the Swaraj, as you said, of freeing ourselves from colonial rule, but it was freeing ourselves from the shackles that bind us within, from the fetters of the self, so that we can understand the other. The whole idea that education is not just about developing skills. The idea that education is also about the kind of society we want, the tranquility, the equanimity within and in society, a harmony. And I think that is what is the crux of experience, because experience brings us to what is called a context, a culture, which the colonial masters tried to completely de-link from the way we were being educated during those times. But a word of caution, that culture itself must not only become the means of reflecting on oneself, our own context, and understanding knowledges which are formal within that context, but culture must also become the object of interrogation, the object of inquiry. Because remember, there's one framework we have, and that is the framework of constitutional values. And anything within those constitutional values would be the way, I think, for education forward, because we cannot look at local knowledges and culture as the only way to move forward. Some of them can be very, very problematic. And I think Gandhiji made sure of that, and that's why he spoke from village to village about the social practices that could be demeaning to the others. So I would say thanks very much to the panelists and to all of you for participating, and a big sorry for those who could not ask their questions.
No, they can ask off the stage, ma'am.
Yes, we can ask
and
off the stage.
Can we give them a
and
big
take
round
this
of
forward.
applause, please?
Thank you.
Thank you, the panelists. Mr. Rajiv will surely add the LQ and the EQ and the IQ and the compassion in our teaching learning process. Madam Swaroop, just for your information, CBSE had sent a group of principals to Wardha